It was during this past week, 250 years ago, that Paul Revere went on his famous ride through the streets of Lexington and Concord, and that the shot heard round the world started the Revolutionary War. Events were held in Massachusetts over the weekend, kicking off a series of historic reenactments all across New England, New York, and Quebec that will continue through next year. And another big one is happening in just a couple of weeks here in the Champlain Valley. And we are pleased to be joined by Beth Hill, the president and CEO of Fort Ticonderoga, the museum and historic site, and Matt Keagle, who is the fort's curator. Welcome to you both. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Tom. We're so happy to be here.
You're getting ready to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm. Fort Ticonderoga is such an iconic site in our nation. It's the site of America's first offensive victory of the Revolution and the site of one of the earliest preservation efforts in America. And in many ways, this 250th commemoration is what we already do every day, engaging our audiences, but to really celebrate and commemorate this incredible milestone for our nation, 250 years, and reflect on that meaning to us today and into the future is such an immense opportunity.
Really, you have a couple of signature events coming up to begin here in 2025. Over the next 2 years, you have the Real-Time Revolution. And why don't you explain to us a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, so Real-Time Revolution is an ongoing program throughout the 250th anniversary commemoration of the Revolution, where the site comes alive through costume staff portraying a period in the fort's history. And for years, we've done different years each year. This is the culmination in many ways of that, unique approach that is singular in the country, where during our Real-Time Revolution, we would be portraying the soldiers and civilians at Fort Ticonderoga to the year, the month, the week, the day that you visit the site. And that will change as we evolve, as we move through the 250th anniversary, from the British soldiers that are there at the very beginning to their capture, replacement by the Green Mountain Boys, and then by Connecticut troops, New York troops, and others from the broad colonial world as those soldiers get to Ticonderoga, all the way to 2027 and the capture of the fort again by the British. And so throughout that period, visitors will have a chance every time they come to see something different, to get a new experience of where Fort Ticonderoga was 250 years ago.
And it's an immersive historical experience that every day, as Matthew's saying, brings people into that moment 250 years ago to the day, and then is punctuated by major signature special events and reenactments.
And you have one of those coming up in just a couple of weeks, May 9, 10, 11, 1775, that Ethan Allen, the Green Mountain Boys, and Benedict Arnold seized and captured Fort Ticonderoga. So you're having a reenactment on that day, on May 10th?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first offensive victory of the Revolution, and Fort Ticonderoga is so excited to launch that. We have a full lineup of experiences. We'll be joined by the America 250th Semi-Quincentennial Commission for the weekend as the congressionally appointed commission. We have the Old Guard Fife and Drum, the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum performing. We'll have a flyover with the Vermont Air National Guard, Green Mountain Boys that Sunday, all adding to a special weekend, the entire weekend. And then, of course, we have the reenactment component, which starts with the British at the fort.
Exactly. So this is all part of that Real-Time Revolution programming highlighted for this special event. So visitors coming throughout the week before, on that Saturday the 10th, they'll see the British garrison in their last hours at Fort Ticonderoga before the fort is captured by the Green Mountain Boys, about 80 of whom got across the lake to make the initial assault on the fortress, which we will also be portraying in a nighttime event to evoke the time that the fort was actually captured, which was around 3:30 in the morning. And then again, if visitors come back on Sunday, they will get a totally different experience because the fort's now in the hands of the Americans.
It's really exciting, and for our nation, it's such a singular moment which happens here in our Champlain Valley, which was so defining in really shaping the course of the Revolution.
Ticonderoga changes the stakes dramatically. This is the first time that the colonists are going out to seek out and take a British objective. And overnight, less than a month after the revolution has begun, we have a totally different scope and scale of this conflict. It's something that kind of happens by happenstance. And again, this is why the story of Ticonderoga is so important, not just because of what happened, but because of the way that it happened. The capture of the fort was actually undertaken by two separate entities, one coming out of Connecticut, one authorized by at least the kind of colonial government in Massachusetts. And they joined forces, just long enough to take the fort, but who's actually in charge, where the authority lies, who's responsible, is all something they're hashing out in very real time after the capture of the fort.
And not just who's in charge, but now what do they do with it?
What do they do with it? How do you get more men, more materiel?
Yeah.
So it prompts these conversations within the American forces before there is even a continental army. There is no even semi-national military force at this time. It's all being played out at Ticonderoga that spring of 1775.
That's amazing. And leading up to the reenactment, leading up to the siege and the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, the Green Mountain Boys actually came over from Vermont, and you're going to reenact that as well.
Yeah, part of that expedition. Again, these parties left from Connecticut and Massachusetts, and they follow this trail that takes them into western Massachusetts, and then make their way up, getting through Castleton, Orwell, and Shoreham, where they embark to go across the lake. And for the last part of that, maybe 15 miles or so, in the days prior to the capture of the fort that we'll be recreating, we have a contingent of that full 80 or so Green Mountain Boys marching along the route. They are stopping at schools and libraries to give historical education programs to those communities before ultimately embarking in bateaux that we have built at Fort Ticonderoga to take them across the lake for that final attack.
And you folks will have that on your social media sites and on your website. Folks can actually follow along.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be segments of that. And so check out our Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and visitors will be able to watch it in real time. Yeah, we're excited to share it.
You're opening for the season on May 3rd,
Yes.
and on May 3rd you have an exhibit, Revolution Anthology, that is opening, and you were kind enough to show us some of the pieces that will be there on display. 2 uniforms in particular that you showed us that were amazing. A beautiful red coat that you believe may be one of the oldest uniforms in existence.
Oh, I think it's the oldest American-made military coat in existence.
Really?
Yeah, very clearly made in a narrow window of time, even before the American Revolution. But again, one that expresses the fact that as this conflict began, Americans didn't necessarily think of themselves as a new country. Independence was not the goal of either the response to Lexington and Concord or the attack on Ticonderoga. It was to assert their rights as English subjects, the full inheritance of English law that they felt that they were due, and that they felt was being undermined by a tyrannical British administration.
And Tom, this is a 5-year exhibition program, a Revolutionary Anthology.
Yeah.
This is our 2nd year, so what that means, every year it's a new exhibit, completely new exhibit with a different theme under the umbrella of the title of Revolutionary Anthologies. And in the exhibition, we have about 100 objects and artifacts that have never before been seen. And a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people know Fort Ticonderoga as the kind of that front-facing experience where they come and they're, just incredibly, taken by the beauty of the site and that front-facing experience. But a lot of people don't realize our museum collections are one of the most important collections really in the world for this early modern era, particularly in military history.
And Matt, you showed us a few items from your massive collection. Unbelievable. You told us up to 200,000 items that you have now in your collection.
Absolutely. And as Beth said, that is one of the aspects that I don't think everyone still realizes about Fort Ticonderoga, that we are not just this historical site, this incredible landscape with its history. We are one of the foremost collections of its kind in the world.
One of the earliest.
And one of the oldest.
In the
We've been here for over a century. We are still collecting material related to this experience. And doing an exhibition like this allows us to pull the lens back. We can focus in on Ticonderoga through these daily programs. Our exhibits, though, the archives, the objects we have in our collection paint a much bigger picture of the world in which all of this happened, both what came before and what will come after that, in a way that very few other places can do.
And when we saw you a few weeks ago, you showed us a piece that has been exhibited before, but it is truly extraordinary. It was the knapsack, and it's truly an amazing piece that you folks have.
It is, and it's part of a piece that I think gives us our own mission to do what we do at Ticonderoga, because it is this humble piece of soldiers' equipment, but because it was preserved precisely because Benjamin Warner wanted future generations to see it and to understand the significance of what he had done during the Revolutionary War.
And not only to have the knapsack, but to have the note.
And he really looked at this knapsack as a symbol of his service. And in the letter, he talks about, as long as I'm passing this down, to my son and to his oldest son and his oldest son, and so on and on to posterity, and as long as one shred of this exists, never surrender your liberties to an aspiring demagogue or foreign invader. And it is a message to all of us how precious our nation is and how much we need to protect it.
And that will be going on exhibit sometime within the next couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that'll be
This iteration does not have the Warner knapsack,
but it will be coming in the next
And our
few
collections
years.
are available online.
Yeah.
We have more than 11,000 of our collections on our online database.
Beth, we are so happy to be teaming up with you at Fort Ticonderoga. We're going to be offering a special screening of the PBS documentary on the American Revolution. Ken Burns is producing it. It'll be out this fall. We are fortunate we are going to be able to hold a screening at Fort Ticonderoga before it premieres across the nation on PBS. We don't have a date quite yet, but if it's Ken Burns, it's going to be incredible.
Yes, we're excited about it. And Florentine Films, who works with Ken Burns, filmed on site at Fort Ticonderoga a number of times, 3 or 4 times.
You have the special reenactment coming up for Fort Ti. Other historic sites are also having events on key days where things happen there, and that includes all over New York, Vermont, New England, even up into Quebec. And so you're all teaming up to really make this an incredible experience.
Yeah, so Fort Ticonderoga has created, recreated for the 250th, the Northern Department, which was the Northern Theater of the Continental Army. It's really a tourism trail for visitors during this 250th period to visit partner sites that have a piece of this story. Right now we have about 18 partner sites. We expect to have more, and it is New York, Vermont, some Canadian sites, as well as tribal partner sites.
And with state historic sites and national historic sites in both countries, with tribal museums, it can be challenging to kind of piece those together. So we wanted to facilitate this experience, this exploration of the Revolution in this region by promoting these sites collectively together.
So the reenactment happening on the 9th, 10th, and 11th, it is sold out for the nighttime reenactment part, but there are many other things happening that
That's
weekend
right.
for folks to enjoy.
Go to our website, fortticonderoga.org. We have our full schedule of each day, and as Matthew has said, every day is this unfolding story, so we know visitors are joining us throughout the weekend. It's the British held fort on Saturday, a lot of activities going on, and then same as Sunday when it's the American held fort. People can purchase the tickets online for Saturday and Sunday. We do have a waiting list. We may have a little fluctuation of movement, but the evening program takes place in the fort itself, unlike a battle reenactment, which we do have an unlimited number of people can attend because our site is so large. This is somewhat of an intimate experience because the fort, in a way, becomes the stage. And so it's going to be a very special evening. But again, we'll have the videography and certainly be able to share that. So if people can't attend in person, they certainly can see that as well.
So your Facebook page, social media, your website
YouTube,
will have all of that. Beth Hill, thank you. Matt Keagle, thank you so much for coming by.
Appreciate it.